In the tool, we start with the definition of compassion. And we do this for a couple reasons. One, we have an amazing team member on the Suivera team who came forward and told us that, look, sometimes it's just really helpful to start at the beginning and give a common definition so we're all on the same page. So the lovely Linda really kind of made us go, oh yeah, of course, having a common language is so important. So starting with that base definition. But with compassion, it's really important because even in the field of psychology and counseling and coaching, compassion is defined differently among all of the different fields and even within each field. So having a standard starting point for what compassion means in language, so we know where we're starting from, I think it's really important, because what compassion means to me might not be what compassion means to you.
Yes.
And so the definition we utilized is like a 4-part definition. And although we do have a step 1 in our compassion calisthenics for the actual workout, to me, what I found as I went through this month and we were kind of practicing what we were telling other people that they could utilize to practice too, was that it actually started with understanding the definition. And we were talking about this a little bit, and I have it actually pulled up so that I don't misstate as we were saying. But the definition starts out, and the very first step in the definition is to have an awareness of your own suffering or the suffering of others. That's the first part of the definition. And the reason I found that was so valuable for me is it's about being in the present moment. You can't have awareness that somebody or something is suffering, even yourself, if you're not in the present moment. If you're thinking ahead or you're thinking back about how something just happened, and again, like traveling, so easy to get out of the present moment. So if we're constantly facing that I'm ahead or I'm looking back, or I'm ahead or I'm looking back, then it would be very hard for me to know if you're in any way suffering, or for me to even realize man, my feet hurt. I'm suffering right now. I need to do something about it. So there's that whole compassion being an outcome of being present, but being present being an outcome of exercising compassion.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point. I'm going to take it a little step further too on this. I feel like the definition is suffering within yourself or another, and I honestly feel like it instead of an or, it should be an and. Just like we've been kind of talking about throughout this podcast and multiple episodes, because an or kind of creates an other. Just the way that's set up. And so it's hard to focus on both or engage in both when the definition itself is focused on one. And it's, compassion can really flow well with empathy, right? And that's gonna be another conversation that we'll talk about later. But part of compassion is inclusion. And so when we are recognizing that someone else has suffering, it can help us understand our own. And if we can understand our own suffering, that can help us understand another's. And so that creates a connection. It creates that oneness. It creates that unity. And as we talked about at the beginning of this month, what is compassion? Our little definition was communicating passion. Another word for passion is love. So communicating love. And so when you can see yourself in someone else and see someone else in you, That is communicating love.
Your suffering is my suffering.
Mm-hmm.
My suffering is your suffering.
Exactly.
And so even if I have the most amazing life, if you're suffering, that impacts me.
Exactly.
And so, very well said. And I feel like that moves us to that second phase, which is that sympathy or concern for another person's or yourself, nice, for anything, any suffering that is occurring.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to have that connection, that sympathetic concern, you first have to start by being aware that it's there. So, like I have this computer in front of me right now. If I am in the present moment because I'm typing on a computer and that's pulling my focus into the present moment, that doesn't mean that I'm aware of what's going on around me, right? And so, or even within me. Actually, half the time it does the exact opposite. It pulls all of my focus from everything else, all of my awareness. And suddenly I'm not aware of myself or you and anything other outside that is a living entity that may need my focus in the moment. And so to me, that was another real oh, okay, yeah, so I'm diving into this definition. And as you had brought up on another podcast, if I'm sitting in the question, I'm really taking time, and in this case, it's not a question, it's a definition. I'm truly sitting in the definition, and I'm asking myself, okay, I'm starting with an awareness of the suffering of myself and others. And then I have a sympathetic concern for that. Well, first, I have to be present enough, and then I have to have enough focus that isn't directed in the present moment to something that is not living and connected and conscious.